Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Evolvepreneur Secrets Show for entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Brian Silverthorne, and it's always my mission to help entrepreneurs make a difference with their businesses and to navigate the sometimes messy worlds of startup, growth, or relaunch. And today we're going to dig deep with our guest and get you the best concepts and strategies to fast track your business. And today's special guest is Rich Owen. And has 50 years of experience in information protection. He's created 5 very successful information security programs. Welcome to the show, Rich.
Thank you.
I'm anxious to hear what's going on here. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about your background and what your current focus is?
Okay, well, currently I'm retired after 50 plus years of information protection. I started off in the Army Security Agency as electronic warfare, electronic countermeasure systems repairman. Our customer was the National Security Agency. So right up front, I was indoctrinated what confidential means confidential and how to protect it. So from there, I had some contractor positions at NASA and the National Security Agency. And then as a contractor at NASA, I helped design and install the first local area network in the Mission Control Center at Johnson Space Center. They must have liked what they saw because they invited me to become a NASA employee. At the time, I was project manager of small projects and mission operations there at Johnson Space Center in Houston. But that was when cybersecurity started to rear its ugly head. I remember virus number 5. So I was asked to create a security program to protect the information about the astronauts and their lives. Probably the exciting thing people enjoy hearing about is I worked for the real Mr. Failure is Not an Option, Gene Kranz, as shown in the movie Apollo 13.
Yeah, that was Ed Harris, was it?
Ed Harris, yes. In fact, Gene said he couldn't have played the role as well as Ed did.
Interesting. So how did you transition from there into what you're doing now?
Well, it's just an evolution. It was like in the beginning days there at NASA, there was no laws, there were no guidelines, no standards. I was very fortunate working for Gene. Failure was not an option. You knew where you stood with Gene. He had a very clear direction. One of the exciting war stories I like is we were replacing a mainframe with a network of Unix computers. And somehow or another, the security guy didn't get an invitation to the design review. Don't know. But I found out about it and snuck in the back of the auditorium. And they're going over the design and they're about ready to throw holy water on this, saying this is all good. And I said, hey, wait a minute. What about audit? We need to be able to audit what happens on those computers. And the guy in charge of design said, we don't have money for audit. I said, wrong answer. Well, says who? I says, me, but if you don't believe me, go ask Gene. After a short pause, they came back and said, what do you mean by audit? Because they knew if they went to Gene, he was going to hammer them on this. And so the exciting thing and the important thing that people should get out of this is strong executive support right there allowed the security people and the technology people and the business people to come up with the right solution instead of each person having to climb to the mountaintop and fight a silly battle.
Yeah, so, that's great. When you've got support from the top down, it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah.
So once you finished up there, you got into consulting along those lines or something else?
Actually, I left there and I did manage some teams to break in computers for hire. We'd go to a company and say, give us this much money and we'll break into your computers and show you how we did it. And so you got to protect yourself. That was kind of fun for a while. And then I went from there to creating the program for the Attorney General in Texas. And then I went from there to managing security at Dell. I created my own company for a while. Still, this was the early 2000s, and it was pretty difficult at that time because payment card industry didn't have any teeth, and health insurance, the HIPAA rule. They had a rule for privacy, but they had not approved the security rule yet. So it was kind of difficult to get people to understand the importance of security. So I moved out here to Arizona, and I went to early warning services, and I created the security program for them. Probably the couple of interesting points there is with early warning services, each night the banks would dump their data to them, and then the next day the banks would then access that same data. So even though early warning was about a $300 million company at the time and probably 200 or 300 employees, I was sitting on about $90 trillion worth of risk when it came to all the data we had. So it's interesting to look at not the size of the company or the number of employees, but what is the data you have and what's at risk there.
Yeah, there's that sounds like a pretty good responsibility. So now there's more and more data out there. There are more and more rules, like you say, HIPAA has expanded and others. There seems to be, and I'm the uninitiated here, but there seems to be a lot more people out there trying to take advantage of technology to take advantage of people. So there's always good guys and bad guys, but there seems to be more bad guys working in the to get through security so they can take advantage of whoever's on the other side. So have you got any tips and tricks just for the people in business for themselves, or for personal tips and tricks on how they might be able to protect themselves?
Well, you hit it right on the head. Well, first of all, I need to tell you that entrepreneurs listening, they need to understand that they are the single most important control in security. If they don't care about security, they can be assured their employees, anybody working for them, will not care about security either. So they need to care and let people know they care. So the single most, the number one threat vector by the bad guys is the employee, the user, the customer. So that's where a lot of attacks are, and things have become automated. In the early days when I was there at NASA, I would sit in the office late at night and hear the phones ringing in sequence where somebody was calling a phone number after phone number to see if a computer would respond. And that was being done somewhat automated and somewhat manual. Now there are entire organizations out there, to include nation states, which are constantly scanning your computer to look for a weakness. And if they can exploit it, then they dig deeper.
Yeah, is that you mentioned the employee probably being the weakest link? Is that clicking on links that contain a virus or something? Is that the most common way in?
The employee taking an action, clicking a link, for example, is caused a ransomware of Colonial Pipeline. Shut that down. Clicking a link, oftentimes they'll be conned into giving up their ID and password. Clicking a link, when they do that, they're exposing some information or making a connection outside of their protection zone, and now allowing somebody to circumvent the security controls that we put in place. I saw many examples of that as well. So the employees need to be very smart when they're reading their email. They can't just reading, oh yeah, I'm going to click this and see what happens. Not cool. In fact, it's kind of funny. About 2 years ago, when I first started my retirement, I started collecting all these phone calls and emails and messages and social media scams, and I actually put them in a book. And it's one of my books that I published. It's called "Your Personal Information is at Risk: A Guide for Protecting Yourself." And it's just a collection of what you should think about in protecting your information, and how you would recognize a scam, some real scams that are in there, and what you should do about it when you see them. I think you're on mute, Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I said I think I may have gone overboard because I've got a practice where I don't click on links from anyone I don't know, and even if it's a forwarded link from somebody I do know, I double check with them to make sure it comes from a reliable source before I do that because I just don't want. I'm too lazy to deal with the consequences of it.
If a lot of people would do that, we'd cut down a lot on the cybercrime.
Yeah. So the book that you wrote, so you wrote it as a like a legacy piece, an information piece to give people some good knowledge based on your experience.
Yes.
Good, good. Did it achieve bestseller status, or how do
Well,
people?
no, well, it's kind of funny. That was my first book that I published, and I wasn't so much looking for bestseller as just to get the word out there. And I didn't have the capital to put into going out and doing a lot of heavy duty marketing, but I just put it out there and made it available. This is a book for everybody, the general user. Now, since then, my latest book is called The Alchemy of Information Protection, subtitle A Cybersecurity Druid's Spell Book. Now, this is the book that I have specifically targeted for executives, sole proprietors, and so they can understand what information protection is and what the role is in protecting it. This is so important to me because I have seen so many small businesses ignore protection of their information. Uh, the executive of a small company, business owner, understands cash flow is king. And you're right, on a football team, you're not going to win without offense. But if you don't have a good defense, you can still lose with a strong offense. And that's what information protection is, it's that defense. And this book tells you in plain business terms what is information security and steps you can take to understand how you can protect yourself simply by putting your data in the right place or backing it up and what to do with your backup.
Yeah, that sounds like a very valuable piece of information. How do people access this? How are you getting it out there? Are you using some proactive marketing methods?
It has hit bestseller on one of the links, one of the categories in Amazon. It's certainly available on Amazon. It's available just about any place you can buy books online. Also, you can go to my webpage, johnnysecurityseed.com. That's not Johnny Appleseed, but johnnysecurityseed.com. The story behind that is I used to tell people I'll go any place, anytime and talk about security, kind of like Johnny Appleseed. So that's where Johnny Security Seed comes from. You can go there and you can see information about those two books. Plus, I have another set of books out there that I've targeted young people. We have a real shortage of professionals in this industry, and I'm trying to motivate young people to get involved with cybersecurity. So I created a series of books called Cybersecurity Sam. It's a collection of stories about this high school kid who ends up working with the FBI to solve cybercrime. So it's, in fact, the series has been called the Nancy Drew of the cyber world. It's a good mystery story, and it's written so that middle school students can understand it and apply the principles and see what the risks are.
Interesting. So under the heading of Johnny Appleseed,
Johnny Security Seed.
Well, I'll
Okay.
get to that. Under the heading of Johnny Appleseed,
Yes.
who wandered the countryside planting apple trees. How are you wandering the countryside planting your security seeds?
Well, it's a lot easier these days because with the virtual world, I give free presentations to schools. So I make them available over my webpage. So interested, I'm just, like I said, in retirement, my motto is I'm trying to help people avoid the evils of the internet. And it's all through education, getting them to understand what's out there and what they can do to avoid the problems.
Yeah, hitting schools is a great spot, starting in grade school to learn about all that stuff. So do you do those things? If you do them virtually, are they pre-recorded or do you do them live or both?
I do them live.
Okay.
The interesting thing is by doing them live, oftentimes at the end, I'd get questions about how do I get into this cybersecurity field that you're talking about. So I ended up creating book 4 of the Cybersecurity Sam series. It's called Spring Break. In this story, Sam, of course, solves the problem of the day, but ends up having a conversation with an FBI agent of how do I get into this. Now that book is totally free. It's downloadable free off of my webpage, Johnny Security C. And it kind of helps you get into the idea of how you get into information security.
Well, that sounds like a needed and honorable endeavor, because you're right. The world will always have bad guys.
Yep.
And there's a lot more of them that seem to be specializing in the security area, because most people, it's like leaving the doors unlocked in their house or their keys in their car, the way things are set up now. So they've got to learn to protect that. So what's the best piece of advice you would give to an entrepreneur or an individual about security protection?
Well, like I said, the entrepreneur, it's got to be, you have to care. If you don't, no one else will. And my example with Gene Kranz, he cared, and I was able to get things done the right way. In fact, while I was there at the Space Center, the astronauts gave me the Silver Snoopy. It's a little lapel pin that flew on one of the missions. So that was pretty exciting getting that from the astronauts. But there again, it comes back to the leadership. If you have to be strong at the top and make smart decisions. And in my book, I lay out way management should look at security and implement from a management standpoint. What do you intend to protect? And then go from there. You can't back up and say, well, I don't have the technology, I don't have the budget. If you have the money, whether you have the money or not, if you have the data, you have an exposure. And the trick is to limit that exposure. And that's where my book on the alchemy of information protection helps you look at data. And then you can make the decision, do I want to keep my data on my server here, or do I want to put it in the cloud? And what concerns I have if I put it in the cloud.
Good advice. Good advice. Well, why don't you tell us one more time how people can find you and get hold of your books, and maybe a final thought for this?
Well, I thank you. Yeah, here again, go to johnnysecurityc.com. There you get a little bit more of my history. You can find out about my books, about the presentations. I even have a little bit of some free downloads there, and I also have a little section, if you go to the far right, of cybersecurity prayers that you might appreciate.
Oh, wow. That sounds interesting. So I think we'll leave it there. So folks, that's a wrap on another great guest episode of the Evolvepreneur Secrets Show for entrepreneurs with our guest, Rich Owens. And before you go, if you liked it, please give us a 5-star review. And if you'd be so kind, maybe recommend it to a couple of other people to spread the word. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any future episodes, go to evolvepreneursecrets.show and sign up. And if you're an entrepreneur, make your next best idea start today.